Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Well, first off, I'd just like to say a little bit about the importance of carrying on when we encounter difficulties or unexpected obstacles, or something's not going as well as we want it uh, to keep moving forward. So not to give up, not to abandon our efforts, and to maintain a sense of humor around it. So we screwed up the chanting a little bit, but oh well. You just laugh and smile and you move on. You keep carrying on with the whatever you're doing. So, especially in our Buddhist practice, this is really important. So, to keep a sense of humor, to keep a sense of self forgiveness, a lightheartedness in our practice. So, our practice doesn't need to be some kind of grim, soul crushing experience. It can be lighthearted, joyful, relaxed, while still being sincere, while still being lively, while still being powerful. So there's a lovely sutta where the Buddha talks about 4 ways to practice. So he said there's the way which is fast and pleasant. There's the way which is slow and pleasant. Then there's the way which is fast and unpleasant, and the way which is slow and unpleasant. So of these 4, I've encountered quite a lot of practitioners who seem to select number 4. They seem to be selecting the slow and painful approach. And every now and then I encounter someone who seems to think they're taking the fast and painful approach, but realistically it seems to be going about as slow as everybody else. But more to the point is that we don't need to pick a painful approach at all. We can practice in a way which is pleasant, a way which is lighthearted, a way which is blissful, which is characterized by pleasant states of mind, which is characterized by a sense of lightness and ease. So this is one of the things which always impressed me about my preceptor, Ajahn Pasanno. Although he's quite senior, he's been a monk for at this point about 40 years or something, a bit longer than that maybe. I'd have to do the math. 40 years, 45 years? I don't remember. Somewhere around there. Let's say 40 years. He's been a monk for about 40 years. He's quite well known and respected within the Western Theravada monastic communities. His practice is very strong, very solid. He's deeply committed to the Dhamma, to practicing the Dhamma, sharing the Dhamma, to living the Vinaya, to living a disciplined life, a life of self-restraint. And yet he always seems to be relaxed. He always has this relaxed, lighthearted way of going about what he's doing. Even when he was scolding the junior monks for misbehaving, he would do so in a lighthearted, relaxed way. Even when he was sitting up very straight with excellent posture, he'd be doing so in a lighthearted, relaxed way. So even on the community work days, when we would all go out and do physical labor in the monastery, he would get on his raggedy old robes and he would come out and join us with whatever it was, whether it was chopping firewood or hauling stones or whatever it was. He'd be right out there with the rest of us, doing the physical work in a lighthearted, relaxed way. So this was something which eventually started to really sink in just in watching him go about his activities. Is even though he was a serious practitioner in the sense that he was very committed to the practice, he was not serious in the sense of this like grim, joyless attitude of mind that we sometimes associate with the word serious. And in fact, every now and then he used to mock the that kind of grim, um, clenched teeth mm, approach to practice. He'd be like, "Oh, look at me! I'm a serious practitioner, and I'm seriously good at making myself miserable." It's like, well, yeah, it doesn't need to be that way. We don't need to make ourselves miserable. We don't need to have this like white knuckled, clenched teeth approach to our practice in order for it to be effective. In fact, if we're a bit more lighthearted and relaxed, then our practice tends to flow much more smoothly and easily. So, this is a practice of letting go. It's a practice of relinquishment, of renunciation, and also letting go of our seriousness a little bit, letting go of that white knuckled grip a little bit. Also tends to contribute to the overall project of teaching ourselves how to let go of dukkha. So let's all try to follow the fast and pleasant approach to practice, which is to let go as much as possible in a light-hearted, relaxed way. Let go as much as you can. So the topic tonight, well, just before we started broadcasting, Somer and I were trying to figure out just what this topic actually is. Um, and I'm still not exactly clear what this topic is or what I'm supposed to be talking about. Something about connection in the age of social media. Well, that seems to be working because we're all connected, even though most of us are not in the same room. So clearly that part's working out pretty well. So here at the monastery, there's currently 4 people in the room. And I think we're all pretty wonderful people, and I think we connect with each other relatively well. At least that's how it seems on the outside. And there's however many people tuning in through YouTube, however many people tuning in through Facebook. So all told, we've probably got a few dozen people all plugged in one way or another. Even though there's only 4 people in this room, there's a lot of other people in different parts of the world who are all connected together. So that gives us a sense of connection with others. And of course, every now and then we do get to be in other people's presence. And there's a sense of connection which can come up there as well. But also, often what we come to realize, the more we interact with others, is that it often feels like other people never quite really understand us. They never really quite understand what's going on inside us. Sometimes they get pretty close. Sometimes they understand a part of what we're experiencing, some piece of it or aspect of it. But even when we're in the same room as another person, there's often still that feeling like we're not quite being seen, we're not quite being heard, we're not quite being fully understood. And this becomes even more noticeable when interacting with people who are not in the same room. So interacting through text messages, through uh, social media platforms, through emails, through voice calls, if you're into that sort of thing. I'm not, just for the record. So with these ways where there's much more limited avenues of communication, then again, that feeling of not quite understanding each other, not quite thoroughly connecting with each other can come up even more strongly. It can be even more apparent. So to some degree, this is something which we just need to accept as an inevitability. So it is inevitable that when interacting with others, we will not always fully understand each other. In fact, most of the time we won't. Even the people who know each other extraordinarily well, there's still usually some degree of misunderstanding between them, some degree of disconnect between each other. So to some extent, we just need to accept that this is inevitability. It's just part of life. Part of life is that ultimately our experience is ours alone, in the sense that no matter how hard we try to communicate it to other people, odds are they'll never quite get it. They might almost get it or get close to getting it, but usually they never quite get it. And that's okay. It's only a problem if we want it to be otherwise. It's only a problem if we expect it to be otherwise. It's only a problem if we think that happiness depends upon people understanding us 100%. But if instead we accept that that's not likely to happen, then it ceases to be a problem. If we stop wanting a deep, intimate, complete connection with others, then the lack of such a thing is simply not an issue anymore. And we also then start to appreciate the level of connection that we can have. So even just a small, superficial, friendly connection with another person is something that we start to really appreciate because we start to see that it's not something to take for granted. In the suttas, it talks in a handful of places about one of the forms of existence, one of the forms of rebirth that's possible to experience. And that's of beings who live isolated in the midst of a vast darkness. And in that darkness, they are completely alone. So, this is considered to be one of the planes of misery, one of the unfortunate, unpleasant states of existence, which one is reborn in as a result of making unwholesome choices. In that state of existence, one is experiencing loneliness, this intense loneliness of quite literally feeling like they're the only being in the universe, because that's their actual experience. Their actual experience is being the only being in a vast blank darkness. And one of the interesting things about this is that in some of the places that these beings are mentioned in the suttas, is that when a Buddha attains awakening, so when a being attains full awakening and becomes a Buddha, then for a brief moment, a bright light illuminates those dark worlds. And for a brief moment, those lonely beings are able to perceive each other. They're able to see each other and recognize that there are other beings sharing that same vast darkness, that they're not alone after all. It's just most of the time they can't connect with each other. They can't see each other. They can't hear each other. And then the light fades and they go back to being in their lonely darkness. So recognizing that there is such a state of being, there is a state of being where one really is completely alone in this dull, dreary darkness. And that's not what we're experiencing. We do have the opportunity to connect with others. So even the smallest connection is something to value, something to be grateful for, something to appreciate. And every time we have an opportunity to make a friendly connection with another person, then we take up that opportunity. We take the chance that we're given, the chance that we have as the result of our own good karma. And actually making friendly connections with others is the karmic basis for not being lonely, both in this life and in future lives. So it doesn't need to be a major thing. Maybe you're walking in the park while wearing a mask and possibly a face shield and a full bodysuit and maintaining at least 2 meters of distance from everybody else, of course. But even so, when you encounter someone in the park, you can, from a safe distance, say, "Hello, how are you? What's your name? Hope you're well." You can make that friendly connection with another person, and to appreciate that opportunity for a brief moment of mutual friendliness, mutual connection. So, not expecting it to be deep, powerful intimacy, but rather appreciating what there is, appreciating that small degree of superficial connection as still being a way that we develop wholesome affinities with other sentient beings. This is, interestingly enough, this is actually in the list of bodhisattva practices. One of the bodhisattva practices is to actively develop wholesome affinities with other beings, to make a conscious effort to develop wholesome connections with other living beings. So this is something which is highlighted then as a practice which forms the basis for awakening, which helps to form the causal basis for awakening. So it's not to be disregarded, but rather really taking the opportunity every time we get to form those wholesome, positive connections with others. And we can do the same through social media. We can do the same through electronic communication. We can do the same through any of the tools that we have at our disposal these days. Yeah, so maybe it's difficult to have as thorough a communication through the internet as you might in person. Maybe that's true, but it's still better than nothing. It still gives us an opportunity to start to cultivate those wholesome, positive connections with others. The opportunity to give and receive support, to give and receive comfort, to give and receive solace, which is something that we always, always, always benefit from. But especially in these days, in these times when many people are feeling a bit of cabin fever, many people are feeling a bit lonely and isolated, many people are feeling a bit dark and grim. Well, make use of the tools that you have to connect with others in a wholesome way. So this doesn't necessarily mean sharing snarky memes. Uh, Maybe though it can mean sharing friendly words. Just reaching out to someone you haven't spoken to in a while and saying, "Hello, how are you doing? How are things going for you? Hope all is well. What have you been up to? What's bringing you joy?" So reaching out and connecting with people who you maybe haven't connected with in a while. And these days, especially keeping up connection with your relatives uh, and your close friends. Really trying to keep those relationships strong and powerful. Um, and one of the most important things, though, is to maintain a clear sense of connection to yourself. So developing an intimate relationship with yourself. So clearly knowing your own mind in each moment, clearly knowing your own emotions in each moment. So listening deeply to yourself, just as you would listen deeply to a friend that you care about. Just as you would listen with wholehearted attention to a friend who needs an ear to speak to. Listen to yourself with that same gentle intensity. So listening to your mind, listening to your heart, listening to your body, without judgment and with openness, with kindness, seeking to make a connection with yourself. Because if you can do that, you'll never be lonely. The more clearly you know your own body and mind, the less lonely you are. The more accepting and loving you are of your own body and mind, the less lonely you will be. And the more stable and solid you are in that self knowing, the more serenity you will bring to the other people you are connected to, the more happiness you will bring to them. And the more benefit you can bring into the world as a whole. So I don't have a whole lot to say beyond what I've already said. So I think at this time we can go ahead and switch into Q&A mode. So if there's any questions or comments, um, please feel free to go ahead and type them in the live chat, and we'll start going through them.
Thank you, Bante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And Key says Ajahn Brahm also incorporates humor into his talks, although he's a serious practitioner.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good reminder. And Trisha says, longtime practitioners have this grace, a layperson or monastic, that has really inspired me. They could trip or spill tea, but there's always this easy grace, so it doesn't matter.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's something to aspire towards.
And Gabriela is asking, how do we cultivate the right kind of appreciation that can overcome a deep sense of alienation?
Well, first off is to look at that feeling of alienation. So what is that? What does it feel like? What's it coming from? So it's always based in some kind of defilement or delusion. So try to get a sense. What's it coming from? How can we work through that? As for appreciation, yeah, well, appreciate what you have. So one wonderful practice is gratitude practice, where you just start making a list of all the things you have that you can be grateful for. Right now, I'm pretty healthy. I can be grateful for that. Right now, I'm living with good friends. I can be grateful for that. Right now, I've got enough food to eat. I've got enough robes to wear. I'm warm at night. I have access to clean water. A friend of mine in my hometown just recently found out that the tap water is filled with lead poisoning, and the government hadn't actually been telling anybody about this until he made a direct inquiry about the safety of the water, and then they finally admitted that it wasn't safe to drink. So something which I take for granted every day, which is access to clean water. Actually, lots of people in the world don't have that. Even in this country, which is supposedly so developed, a lot of people still don't have access to clean water, safe water. That's something to be grateful for. Uh, I have access to the Dharma. How wonderful is that? Something else to be grateful for. And I have the benefits which have come from my years of practice. A persistent feeling of peacefulness in the mind. It's amazing how nice that is. It's something to be grateful for. So just do this every day. You can do it in your meditation practice if you like, to spend a period of time just reflecting on what you have to be grateful for, and cultivating that sense of gratitude, of appreciation. You can also do it outside of meditation by writing a list. Just sit down and give yourself a designated amount of time. And just spend that time just writing down all the things you have to be grateful for. And really cultivating a sense of genuine appreciation for all of them. Again, this can make a tremendous impact on the mind. So the Buddha, he spoke about cultivating gratitude in a number of places in the suttas. The words he most commonly used were katanyu and katavedi, which literally mean knowing what's been done, understanding what's been done. So in particular, understanding what others do for us, what others do to help us, and appreciating it, being grateful for it. But also understanding that our present good fortune is the result of our own good karma from the past. So also being grateful for the good things that we've done that lead to us having things we can appreciate here and now. Those are a few thoughts on that.
Thank you. And Demi is sharing that when I've been going for walks lately, more people have been greeting me from afar than usual. Nice.
Great. Yeah.
And Ned is asking, how rare is it to encounter the Buddha Dharma?
Extremely rare. So there's a simile that we find in the suttas, which is there's a blind turtle swimming in the ocean which comes to the surface of the ocean once every 100 years. And at the same time, there's a piece of wood with a hole in it floating on the surface of the ocean. So the odds of the turtle coming to the surface and poking its head above the water, and its head just coincidentally happening to poke through the hole in the wood, that's more likely to happen than you are to be reborn at a time and a place where you have access to Dharma. That's not very good chances. So let's make the most of it. So be grateful for access to the Dhamma. It's incredibly rare, incredibly precious. Make the most of it. Okay.
And Chris is saying, I thought this talk would address the issue of many young people feeling disconnected from each other despite their heavy use of social media.
I think I did address that somewhat. Not really? No? Jenna is shaking her head. I guess I didn't address that. Oopsie.
Well, if you have a specific question, Chris, on that, then Bante, we can ask Bante. And Gabriela is asking, what are some ways to help someone else suffering from loneliness?
Well, normally I would say give them a hug, but these days that would probably be interpreted as an attack. Unless you're living with the person, then it might be okay. Yeah. Yeah, so if you've been living with the person in isolation for some time, then hugs are probably okay, because realistically, if either of you had anything, you would have shared it by now. And by anything in this case, I mean coronavirus. Yeah, give them a hug. Speak kindly to them. Show that you care. Do nice things for them. Ask them how they're doing. Listen to them. Pay attention. These are all things which help quite a lot. If they're a Dharma practitioner, then you can talk about the Dharma. If they're not, you can do so in a stealthy or subtle way, but don't be too blatant about it. Mostly just listen. Be there for them. Be kind to them. Okay?
And Easter is asking, is it a requirement to believe in reincarnation and other spiritual aspects of Buddhism in order to be a Buddhist?
So, a few days ago, I gave a talk on karma and rebirth, which gives a pretty broad overview of what we mean by rebirth in Buddhism. We don't normally use the word reincarnation. We normally use the word rebirth or reappearance. So I recommend looking back and listening to that talk. I think it was last Friday.
Yeah.
Karma and Rebirth was the title. That gives a pretty good overview of what we mean by rebirth and how it fits into the overall scheme of Buddhist practice. As to whether you need to believe in rebirth in order to be Buddhist, well, it depends on what you mean by Buddhist. If you just want to practice Buddhism to a certain degree, try some things out, see what it feels like, yeah, you don't need to believe anything in particular. Just start studying the Buddhist teachings and trying out some practices and see how it goes. That's fine. But it is true that karma and rebirth are central components of the Buddhist worldview. They are central components of the Buddhist perspective. They are extremely important. Understanding them is crucial to making substantial progress on the path. But if you're not ready to face that aspect of the Buddhist teachings, then set it aside for now. Don't reject it. Be open to the possibility that you might eventually decide that it's true, but set it aside for now and focus on doing other practices, other aspects of Buddhism which you can relate to more easily at this time. And then later on, when you come back to looking at karma and rebirth, you might find that you're a bit more open to it, that something has shifted in your mind that makes it more acceptable. more palatable, easier to relate to and understand. Yeah, definitely. Listen to the talk I gave a few days ago. And in the meantime, just do whatever aspects of Buddhist practice you are comfortable with, and push your limits a little bit. Also, do some things that you're slightly uncomfortable with. Okay?
Thank you. And Kevin is encouraging us all to practice giving. So if you want to support the monastery, you can go to buddhistinsights.com/donate.
Mm.
Sadhu, 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 Kevin.
Thank you.
And Laura is, or Laura, I don't know how to pronounce it, says, thanks, Bante. I just reached out to a friend who I have been estranged from for the last 5 years because of your encouragement.
Oh, wonderful. Great.
So sweet. And Chris is saying, demographically, it seems young adults with heavy use of social media platforms 2 hours a day have twice the change of experiencing social anxiety, according to a 2017 study. I have found for me that my insanity increases proportionately to the amount of time I spend on social media. When I take sabbaticals from social media, my mind calms and I'm better able to meditate.
So then you might consider spending less time on social media. Or you might consider looking at how you're using it. This also is an important thing. It's not just whether or not you're using social media, but how are you using it? So if you're staying up late, endlessly scrolling through your wall on Facebook, well, that's probably not doing you a whole lot of good. Or if you're always looking up things that are agitating to you or upsetting, also, again, probably not the best use of your time. But if you use it as a way of sharing wholesome Buddhist things, or engaging in conversation about your practice, a way of connecting with other practitioners, well, that's all perfectly wholesome, actually, quite beneficial. So it really depends on how you use it. A tool is just a tool. If you have an axe, you can use it to chop firewood or chop up your neighbor. It's not the axe that's the problem, but rather what you choose to do with it. So it's the same. Social media is a tool. Try to use it in a way which is not injuring yourself. Okay.
And Gabriela is asking, how much is honesty the critical component of the proper use of social media?
That's a pretty open-ended question. So honesty is an important element of Buddhist practice. But as I mentioned the other day, honesty doesn't mean oversharing. Was it you that said that, Ayasoma?
Maybe.
Anyway, honesty doesn't mean oversharing. It just means that we don't tell lies. We don't try to deceive or trick or defraud people. But we also need to practice wise consideration of what's useful to say, what's beneficial to say, when it's the right time to speak, and always trying to speak gently, respectfully. So honesty is an important component, but the other considerations, is it at the right time? Is it gentle? Is it beneficial? And so on. Those are just as important. Yeah, and again, honesty doesn't mean oversharing. So sometimes something is true, but there's not really any benefit to saying it. And in fact, it may even be harmful to say it. And in those cases, it's better not to speak. Okay.
And Chris, getting back to what he was saying earlier, says, LOL, I'm an addict. Social media is one of the ways I avoid pain and discomfort, just being honest.
Yeah, so then in that case, actually making clear boundaries around your social media use might be really useful. Like you might set a clear limit for yourself. Like I will permit myself to use Facebook from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. and that's it. When 6:59 comes around, I stop what I'm doing and put it down for the day. So you might set boundaries for yourself. Realistic boundaries. Don't make it too hard for yourself, at least not in the beginning, but set boundaries.
And Sally's asking if in the future we can learn the Ratana Sutta and some sutta related to the Metta Sutta in the Sutta study,
Sure.
since these days we chant them a lot and would like to understand basically what we're chanting. That
Sure.
sounds good. And Andy is asking, can you give an example or two of how to maintain a consistent mindfulness throughout the day without clamping down on intensity? This is something I need to cultivate, more gentleness.
Yeah, just be aware of your body. As you go through the day, be aware of your body. So it doesn't need to be this tense, mm, gritted teeth kind of approach. Just generally always be aware of your body. And whenever you notice you're getting lost in thought or distracted or spacey or dull minded, well, just stop. Gently place attention back on your body. So you can be uncompromising in a relaxed and gentle way. Try it out. Okay?
Thank you, Bante. And Sally, we did see your email. We're going to get back to you tomorrow. Thank you, Saradu. And Tulia is sharing in terms of social media. It's a matter of how you're using it.
Mm.
Even in using social media, it's a matter of intention.
Mm.
And Chris is saying, I too have to constantly check my motivation behind social media use. Usually it's not beneficial.
One thing that I did a while back with Facebook, by the way, was that I set it to show mm, a few particular monks that I know and like. I set it to always show them first. So anytime I look at my Facebook wall, the first few pages are all only from other monastics. Um, that makes a big difference. So you at least see some things which are relatively wholesome and Dharma related um, before getting into the pile of filth beneath that layer. So I recommend doing something similar. On Facebook, set it to show only wholesome things, Buddhist things first. And then when you do notice that you're starting to scroll through your wall, at least you'll see good things. And when you start to see the wholesomeness of the content dropping, well, that's the time to stop.
All right. And Gabriela is asking, can you repeat what you mean by oversharing in this sense?
Yeah, it's saying things which don't need to be said. And especially carefully reflecting before you speak. Is this beneficial to say? If it's not beneficial, don't say it. Even if it's true, don't say it. So I know a couple of people who are really committed to honesty, but they don't understand what oversharing means. So they're like, I cannot break the precept. I must say this, and it's like, well, no, you don't need to say it, and you don't need to break the precept about not lying. You can not lie and also not overshare. So one person in particular I know has managed to cause a great deal of difficulties in her life because of this, yeah, this rigid approach to honesty of thinking that if it's true, she has to say it. But that's not what the Buddha was talking about. The Buddha was talking about practicing right speech, practicing wholesome speech. And truthfulness is a part of that. But another part of that is self-restraint. So speaking gently, speaking at the right time, speaking what is beneficial, and speaking with a mind of love and kindness. So this is all quite important. So this is how we prevent ourselves from oversharing. Uh, it's asking ourselves, does it meet these 5 criteria? So not just truthful, but also timely, beneficial, gentle, and with loving kindness. Okay.
Thank you. And Sally is asking, could Bante explain a little bit more why wholesome positive connection is basis for awakening? I realized I might have some wrong view that samatha in vipassana is based on own practice.
Well, the Buddha spoke over and over and over again about the importance of having good spiritual companions, about having good spiritual friends, other good people, wholesome people who help to support us, who help to bolster us in our practice, people who mm, give us food and clothing and medicine and shelter, people who teach us the Dhamma, people who help us out when we need help, people who admonish us, who point out our faults to us, people who help us see the way forward along the path. So, for any of that to be possible, you have to have positive connections with people. If you have no positive connections with people, then you don't have all of those supports. So, technically, yes, you do need to sort out wisdom on your own. You do need to develop wisdom within your own mind. That's true. But it's a lot easier if you have the support of wholesome spiritual friends, if you have the support of having good positive connections with others. Okay.
All right, thank you. And Chris says, thank you very much, Bante. Very grateful for your wisdom. So happy I discovered this wonderful organization, Sadhu. Oh, we're happy to have discovered you as well. And Kevin says, I feel like truly applying the 5 criteria to speaking, I'd probably only say like 2 sentences a day. Indeed, I'd not even be saying this right now.
No, what you said just now is fine. I think that meets all 5 criteria. But yeah, it's amazing. You start applying the Buddha's guidelines for right speech, and you become a lot more careful about what you say, because you start to realize that most of what we say is useless or harmful or untimely, or we're saying it in not the nicest way. So yeah, it's true. When you start applying the Buddha's guidelines for right speech, you might find that you talk a lot less. That's fine. No problem. My dad used to say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So that was actually one of his accidentally almost Buddhist things that he would say every now and then. And there's some real truth to this. The Buddha was quite clear on this. If you're going to say something, say it gently. Say it with a mind of love and kindness at the right time. And say what's truthful and beneficial.
And Adriana is saying, right speech for me is more often than not thinking after, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Hey, that's the beginning of wisdom.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah. If you can't practice self-restraint, at least practice self-reflection afterwards.
Ooh.
Because that leads to self-restraint in the future.
I like that quote. That's a good quote. And last question. Actually, we have 2 last questions. So James is asking, in these times, how can one keep the faith faculty strong?
Study the suttas, practice meditation, practice morality, practice kindness. Basically, keep practicing. But studying the suttas is really important, because that's a really powerful way to build up the faith faculty. Another thing that's really useful actually is bowing. Bowing to the Buddha images and cultivating that genuine sense of reverence and admiration and gratitude towards the Buddha. That has a way of strengthening faith. It's really amazing how that works over a period of time. So here, sometimes during retreats, we'll take a period of time, uh, like half an hour, and just spend the whole time just repeatedly bowing over and over again, bowing to the Buddha image. And it's amazing the effect that has on the mind. So this is done across all Buddhist traditions. Monasteries of every single Buddhist variety do practices of this sort. It's amazing how powerful it is. Yeah, so try out some of these practices. See how it feels. See what it does to your mind. Okay.
And Victor is asking, sometimes we have to tell the truth, but we know that will hurt someone.
Hmm.
How to solve this situation?
Yeah. Well, in that case, see what you can do to soften the impact of what you have to say. Try to find the right time and the right place, which will soften the impact, which will make it hurt less. Do something kind for the person beforehand. Uh, Make it clear that you're there for them, that you're not just being a jerk, but that you're actually trying to help them out as much as you can, and really make good on that. Really try to be there for the person. Um, but also really carefully ask yourself, do I really need to say this? Or is there something else I can do which will help address the problem, but which is less hurtful? Okay.
Right. And I think, oh, actually, Kevin is sharing, yes, bowing has helped me in my practice
Mm.
immensely. I was very reluctant until recently after a talk with Bante and Aya. Now I bow twice a day and my practice is stronger. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Great to hear.
Great. Good, good.
And Sally is like, can I ask an easy one? When we do prostrations in front of the Buddha, shall we recite something in the mind?
There's different practices you can do. The simplest one is not to recite anything, but just so you look at the Buddha image, bring up that sense of gratitude and affection and respect, and do your bow, trying to keep that state of mind. Come up from the bow, look at the Buddha image. Again, bringing up that sense of devotion, of reverence, and do your bow. And you just keep practicing in this way with a silent mind, just focused on cultivating those wholesome qualities. Uh, Other options is you can do some repetition in the mind, like a standard one would just be homage to the Buddha. Um, One that I sometimes like to use is thank you. So in my mind, I'll just be repeating thank you as I bow. So I'll look at the Buddha statue and I'll say thank you, and I'll do my bow. The Buddha, thank you, I'll do my bow. That can be really powerful. So it's incorporating gratitude practice. And you can experiment and come up with different ways. Sometimes I recite the names of various bodhisattvas when I bow. And that's something which I like to do, which brings up a wholesome mind state for me. Um, so experiment with different ways of mm, building up your bowing practice. Okay.
Oh, Sally says, so cute. Bante is like son of Buddha. Aw. And Victor is saying, Namaskara. Is that you mean Bante bowing Buddha? I'm not
Oh,
sure.
namaskara. Namaskara means paying homage. Um, yeah, and namas actually technically means bowing or bending. Um, yeah, namaskara technically means making a bow. Yeah.
And Kam says, thank you, Bante, for enforcing these rituals. Rituals can be seen as superstitious, but doing that with wisdom, they're helping the practice and learning.
Hmm.
Yes. Sadhu.
Yeah. Yeah. Ritual, if done with the right state of mind, is a powerful support to our practice. In fact, it is part of our practice because it's training the mind. Anything which trains the mind is part of our practice. Okay?
Yes, it's the salad dressing on the salad. Then we want to eat more salad. And salad is good for you. Anyway, I think that's all for tonight. So thank you so much, Bante, for sharing the Dhamma. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And thank you all for joining in. Chris is asking, so how do I become a monk? Just kidding.
That's
well,
what you think.
yeah, exactly. In Italian, we say behind the joke lies always the truth. I don't know if that's a good translation.
That's pretty good, actually. Yeah.
So perhaps Chris will be joining the club soon. We'll see. Anyway, we're going to meet again tomorrow at 8 a.m. for Sutta study. We'll be studying the second part of the Sabbasava Sutta. And Eli is recommending for Chris to ordain. Actually, they're saying you must ordain, which is great. And then tomorrow evening we'll be meeting again at 7:30 p.m. Same thing for Friday. For Friday. And then on Saturday we'll have meetings at 8 a.m. and at 7:30 p.m. But at 8 a.m. we'll have our first special guest star on guest monk star. So Bante Jayasara from Bhavana Society will be sharing Dharma on both Saturday morning and Sunday morning. So there will be contemplation of death. And then in the evening, Bhante Sudasu and I will be doing monk chat again. So you can bring your questions and ask all the questions that you have. And Tulia is asking, what time is now there? Here is 2:53 a.m. So here it's 8:54 p.m. So I believe we have 6-hour difference from Italy. So
by the way, serious kudos to Tulia for joining in the middle of the night. That's quite impressive.
Yeah. And James says, raises Bante J flag like a fanboy. Okay, wonderful. And there's some positive remarks on monk chat. So
great.
Okay, great. We're all happy. So we'll all see you tomorrow morning, and for everything else, and we'll see how it goes with Bante J. Hopefully he'll figure out how to log into the crazy live streams of YouTube. So hopefully there won't be any technical issues. All right. Well, thank you so much once again for coming to practice Dharma together. And have a great